Good morning, good day, good evening to all of the participants who have joined us this morning for this presentation, which seeks to address the implementation of the Minamata Convention in the Caribbean region. We really want to thank the Minamata Secretariat for allowing us this opportunity to share the work that we have done in our region and really to reach out to others so that we can build collaboration with you and learn from you, and you can also learn from us through either North-South cooperation or even East-West cooperation, as I now coined it. So the presentation, we have a table of contents. So the next slide, please. I'll just briefly tell you about the BCRC Caribbean, the Minamata Convention in the Caribbean region, looking at the Minamata initial assessments that we've done, as well as the National Action Plan that we've facilitated for the government of Guyana. And we also have the representative from the government of Guyana for the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ms. Michelle Aswood, who will be presenting as well. And then we talk a bit about the awareness raising and, of course, looking to the future, that we're not just stopping here, we're continuing the work under the Minamata Convention. So next slide, please. So the Basel Convention Regional Center for Training and Technology Transfer is located in Trinidad and Tobago. And for those of you who may not know, it's the southernmost island in the Caribbean region. And the center, of course, by its name, is a Basel Center, but we also facilitate work under the Stockholm, Rotterdam, and of course, the Minamata Convention. And we do serve 14 parties in the region. And soon, for those of you who are following, Grenada has just acceded to the convention. So we'll soon be serving 15 countries in the region with Grenada's accession. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about the mission and vision of the center. Of course, the center seeks to ensure that the obligations are met by these parties for the conventions, including the Minamata Convention. But overall, our vision and going forward, the center sees itself positioning as a center of excellence in the Caribbean region for waste and chemicals management. Next slide, please. So here we want to show you in a very, very graphical way, very easy on the eyes as well. And congratulations to the team for preparing this map. There are 9 Caribbean parties in the basin, in the Caribbean basin, that are now party to the convention, with the most recent being the government of the Bahamas. So in 2019, 8 parties actually attended COP3. So that was a good representation from our region as well at the Minamata COP. Next slide. So in the Caribbean region, the center has facilitated work under the enabling activity of the Minamata initial assessments, and we've completed at least 9 Minamata initial assessments, and we're currently finalizing the Bahamas, which is the last country that acceded the convention, and we're finalizing their Minamata initial assessment for them. So we've gained great experience in doing the Minamata initial assessments for the region and providing that information to countries to make an informed decision to acceding the convention. So it has been quite successful. For each of these Minamata initial assessments, we've always brought the lessons learned from the previous Minamata initial assessments. So we've continually improved our process at the center and executed quite successfully these reports. All of them, of course, online and available, with the exception, I think, of the government of Grenada and Bahamas. Next slide. Just some other initiatives that we've done, because we didn't just stop there. We've also done, under the Basel Convention, we've done identifying the feasible strategies for the environmentally sound disposal of spent lighting products, where we tested the guidelines for St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. We also facilitated fish sampling for fish, mercury in fish in the region. Very, very cursory type data, so it's not scientific data per se, it's not that type of numbers that we gathered. And we also did hair sampling in women of childbearing age. And finally, we also did an introduction to the inventory of national mercury releases as one of the lessons learned coming out of the Minamata initial assessment process for the region as well, so that countries could understand the actual inventory process and how it's developed. And I think this is my last slide. Next one. Yes, so now I'd like to invite Laura Teixeira, who is the lead officer in collaboration with Ariel, to do this presentation, which is also done jointly with the Ministry of Natural Resources. So Laura, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Jewel. Hi, good morning, good afternoon to all of you from wherever you are signing in from. My name is Laura Teixeira, Project Execution Officer with the BCRC Caribbean, and I will take you through the next portion of the presentation to speak about the project development of the National Action Plan for Artisanal and Small-Scale Gold Mining in the Co-operative Republic of Guyana, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic times. Next slide, please. So this project was an enabling activity with the Global Environment Facility acting as the funding agency, the United Nations Environment Program as the implementing agency, and both the BCRC Caribbean and the Ministry of Natural Resources as the co-executing agencies. Next slide. So in accordance with Article 7, each party that has artisanal and small-scale gold mining and processing within its territory shall take steps to reduce and, where feasible, eliminate the use of mercury and mercury compounds in its mining practices. So in 2016, the government of Guyana completed their Minamata initial assessment. And from then, they were able to notify the Secretariat that mercury emissions and releases in its territory was more than insignificant, leading to the development of the National Action Plan. So the National Action Plan aims to set objectives and mercury reduction targets with feasible timelines that will enable the national ASGM sector to phase down the use of mercury while also protecting and supporting the livelihood of their miners and national patrimony. So in order to develop the NAP, or the National Action Plan, there are certain guidelines and steps to follow as seen in this graphic here. We start with the establishing of a coordinating body or national working group, as we called it, with key stakeholders who provide that information on the national realities within the sector and the management of the sector, which led to furthering the development of the national overview by gathering data in the field, collecting information, doing desktop studies on the different thematic areas, such as the methods and processes related to the actual mining processes, the access to healthcare, and the awareness of to the general public of the dangers of mercury, the social aspects considering gender and indigenous populations, economic aspects talking about access to finance, and the legislative and institutional capacity to support the management of the sector. So following this, following developing that national overview, will come the setting of the goals and the objectives. Once you understand the situation in the sector, the goals and objectives can then be set, leading into the strategy for implementation, which includes the responsible agencies, the timelines, the expected budget, the breakdown of activities, etc., and then ensuring the evaluation mechanism is in place. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to touch on the organizational structure a bit of how we executed this project, you'll see the GEF as the funding agency at the top there, then the UNEP as the implementing agency, followed by the executing agencies, as I mentioned, with the National Working Group and our National Supervisor. And then we engaged international experts to provide that sort of technical guidance and training to the team on the ground. And as you see there in the little gray box, we have the 4 different thematic areas, the national consultants that were hired to really develop the national overview and the proposed strategies in their particular thematic area. And then, as you'll see on the right-hand side, we also hired an assistant coordinator. So this sort of came about after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And once travel was restricted and, things had been a little shaken up with the pause in the project, we hired this assistant coordinator who was someone very familiar with the mining communities. She was someone that was part of the National Mining Syndicate on the ground. to really help us re-engage stakeholders, set the priorities, and recommence the data collection field activities on the ground. So this was something that really worked well for us. She had the knowledge and the understanding and was able to provide that guidance of the realities of the mining communities and what was needed. Next slide, please. Right, so just to quickly touch base on the project timeline that we had. So the typical timeline for the development of a NAP is about 2 years. And we were actually able to, with the significant pause in the project due to COVID-19, we were able to still complete the project within that 2 years. So we had the inception in November of 2019, and that's where we were able to travel and get the on-the-ground training done with the international experts and the national team, followed by the national working group, our first main national working group in January of 2020. And then we had scheduled a pilot field visit, which luckily they were able to go on in February. And of course, March of 2020 was when the pandemic sort of made its way to the Caribbean, COVID-19. That's when the cases started to come to the Caribbean. So we had a significant pause from around March of 2020 to the end of August into September. And you'll see here that that's where the project activities recommenced. We were able to get the data collection fieldwork done in a very short time frame from November of 2020 to February, the end of February of 2021. And then following that, the assessment reports were submitted, strategy documents. We had targeted stakeholder meetings with the key agencies for the different proposed strategies to just make sure that there was that buy-in and that endorsement. And then the drafting of the NAP, and finally the lessons learned workshop in August. And we are currently finalizing the National Action Plan for submission. Next slide. So this here just gives a little graphical view of the areas that the consultants were able to visit in that short time period to do their data collection. So you'll see it's about 5 main areas, and it was quite an aggressive time to get these field visits done within that 3 to 4 months because they weren't able to travel in December. But it showed that they were able to get good representation, and these field visits were sort of determined based on the rising COVID cases, which areas were restricted to travel, the COVID protocols were taken for each field visit, etc. So this kind of shows that we were able to get some good representation in the short time frame. Next slide. So I will now pass on to my colleague, Ms. Michelle Aswood from the Ministry of Natural Resources in Guyana to take you through the next few slides. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'll just go through what we call an overview of the NAP. And highlighted below are the 7 key areas that really led to the development of the strategic objectives, the intervention areas, and the necessary lines of action under the NAP. I'll go through each one of them. The first one is the reduction of the use of mercury, elimination of worst practices, and environmental management. And this speaks directly to increased monitoring and enforcement, building capacity into agency collaboration, and of course supporting miners, looking at them eliminating the worst practices and increasing management of environmental impacts through technical assistance. And more specifically, we're looking at ensuring that miners become aware of and adopt technologies to reduce mercury use and to promote the use of mercury-free technologies and techniques. The second area is formalization, regulation, and update of legislation in the country. And this really supports updating regulation that speaks directly to the use of mercury, speaks directly to the ASGM sector, or as we call it within Guyana, or Port Knockers, and developing the legal, regulatory, and policy framework, as I said, to adequately capture artisanal miners in Guyana's context. The third area we looked at is the development of appropriate financial and market-based incentives. And this highlights access to finance to, one, of course, build resilience and to support the transition as we move towards accessing and adopting appropriate mercury reduction and mercury-free techniques and technologies, which are oftentimes, expensive, and our small and medium-scale miners require financial assistance to support this transition. The next area is the management of the mercury trade and activities related to importation and internal trade of mercury really guided this section. And from a government perspective, this is a key area of interest. Work is already already ongoing in this area as government seeks to track mercury from its importation to its use in what we would call the backdam or within a mining concession. And this is a key area for us as we actively engage in interagency collaboration, and quite a few of our representatives are here this morning from the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Pesticide, Toxic and Chemical Control Board, which are some, and the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, which are the key stakeholders or key agencies to drive the management of the mercury trade. And of course, as we go forward, collaboration with our importers and distributors and the end use miners is very important. And the next area is the strengthening of the public health strategies. And of course, health and well-being of our miners and others working within the ASGM sector is key for government. And this area really addresses healthcare and the improvement in how we treat patients and how we gather data that has impact on mercury, on the miners and the mining communities and our indigenous communities, particularly mercury poisoning. And the next area that we looked at is the consideration for vulnerable groups. And I'll start by saying, while this was highlighted as a strategic objective of its own, it has a bearing on all of the objectives, all of the intervention areas, and all of the activities. So this is echoed with throughout the whole map, but it speaks directly to protection of children, youth, women, and vulnerable communities. And the last area, which is important as well, is raising awareness and outreach. The mining communities are very dispersed throughout certain regions of Guyana, and it is very important as we engage with our stakeholders to ensure that we have the necessary awareness and outreach activities to ensure that they understand the effects of mercury, they understand the necessary transitions to mercury-free environment, and of course, they understand the stages of the first development of the NAP and as we move forward with the implementation of the NAP. Next slide. So what are some of the challenges that were encountered throughout the development of the NAP within a COVID-19 scenario? As Laura mentioned, we had a time lapse between the inception training of the national consultants and the commencement of work. So between February and August of 2020, there was a bit of a slow pace of the work. We had issues with the change in national consultants. Of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a decrease in stakeholder engagement, a change in national priorities. Of course, this was coupled with the COVID-19 pandemic. In March of 2020, we had a change in government, and that led to some changes in national priorities for a while that led to a halt in the project. And of course, there was the inherent risk for the data collection of the field visits due to COVID-19. I would also point out here that this is also coupled with some of the in-country conditions during the data collection. We were in the midst of what we would call the rainy season in Guyana, and it was a bit more than normal. And as a result, the field team had to really assess the situations and plan accordingly. Next slide. So what are some of the mitigation efforts? I mean, of course, we face challenges as we do project execution from time to time. The COVID pandemic is a hurdle, but we had many lessons learned, and we tried to figure out the best way to ensure that our stakeholders were engaged, and we developed a map that is representative of the ASGM sector and, of course, the mining sector in Guyana. So virtual training sessions were held with international consultants to ensure that technical expertise really transitions to the Guyana context. The pilot field visits were scheduled, and we had those were successfully done. Face-to-face interactions were decreased, but we had an opportunity to increase virtual field meetings, and this was quite successful thanks to the BCRC for coordinating. As Laura mentioned, we had an assistant coordinator hired to support the re-engagement of the key stakeholders and logistical coordination of field visits. And I think moving forward, this was one of the key lessons learned, and how can a local assistant coordinator really support during the time where travel was restricted, and of course having the understanding of the local context, the stakeholders on the ground. And this activity really supported the field visits. And all COVID-19 safety protocols were taken for field visits. High-risk areas were excluded from field visits. One, for COVID-19 reasons, and two, due to the in-country conditions as we experienced rainy season. And getting into the fields without the rains is an issue to begin with, much less during rainy season. So those high-risk areas were excluded. And we had an increase in the development of the communication materials, which is actually the next slide. But before we go to that slide, I just want to end by expressing the sentiments conveyed by the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources, Mr. Vikram Bharat, during the NAP Lessons Learned workshop in August. And also, I think in his forward in the NAP, he stated that the Ministry of Natural Resources expresses its appreciation to all of the institutions and people who contributed to the elaboration of the National Action Plan. And the completion of the NAP is a declaration of our national, regional, and global commitment to reducing the use of mercury and mercury compounds in mining, and robustly combating the effects of mercury use, while safeguarding the health and livelihood of our people and the future generations, and of course, protecting the environment. And the ministry appreciates the support of BCRC, JEF, and UNEP as we reach this final stage of the development of the NAP. And we look forward to support as we begin implementation of the NAP soon. So I'll take you to the next slide, which we end with one of the communication materials developed during our NAP. Oh, sorry. Just a few pictures of the field visit. And the last is the video next. The video for the NAP. Thank you very much.
Mercury, also known as quicksilver, can be found naturally in the pores and crevices of the Earth's crust. It is released naturally into the atmosphere by earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Mercury may also be used as a component in many household products, such as in light bulbs, thermometers and batteries, and in various activities such as in artisanal and small-scale gold mining, ASGM. In Guyana, mercury is commonly used in ASGM, which is a prevalent type of gold mining practiced. Unknown to many, however, ASGM is the largest contributor to harmful mercury emissions and releases globally. In mining, mercury is primarily used to amalgamate or fuse together the gold for its extraction from the ore. Whole ore amalgamation involves adding mercury directly to the mined ore once extracted and causes a large amount of mercury to be wasted and lost to the tailings as droplets of liquid mercury are dispersed in the environment. In concentrate amalgamation, mercury is added later in the process to form a mercury and gold fusion, amalgam, after which the amalgam is heated in order to remove the mercury and leave the pure gold behind, causing toxic mercury vapors to be released to the air during this process. Inhaling these vapors over a prolonged period of time can be extremely dangerous to human health. The improper disposal of mercury causes the contamination or pollution of the air, soil, and waterways. Mercury in waterways is ingested by fish and other organisms, and over time, as persons consume contaminated food sources and water, the mercury can accumulate in their bodies and cause serious health problems. The most vulnerable to mercury exposure are those who live and work in mining communities, and is especially dangerous to pregnant women, children, and the elderly. Mercury primarily affects the brain and kidneys and can cause kidney damage, impaired hearing, loss of vision, and loss of balance. Other symptoms of mercury exposure include tremors, insomnia, weakness, twitching of the muscles, headaches, and even respiratory failure. The negative impact of mercury on human health and the environment is a global issue, which brought about the Minamata Convention on Mercury, an international environmental agreement that addresses the human activities which contribute to mercury pollution worldwide, such as mining. As a party to the convention, Guyana recognized that mercury emissions and releases from the ASGM sector needed to be addressed. And under this agreement, a national action plan will be developed, which assesses the realities of the sector and identifies ways in which issues related to mercury use can be dealt with without negatively affecting the livelihood of our miners. The government of Guyana will use the recommendations provided to achieve a phased reduction of mercury in mining by encouraging the miners to introduce and employ efficient mercury-free mining technologies. These mercury-free methods will guarantee effective gold production while decreasing health risks and reducing the negative environmental impacts. The recommendations and strategies of the National Action Plan will also ensure that the necessary support is given to the miners and the ASGM sector for this transition to mercury-free technology, all in the effort to safeguard the health and safety of our fellow Guyanese while protecting national patrimony.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. That video again. Yes, thank you so much for that, Michelle. And that video was one of the videos that was developed during the finalization or the drafting of the National Action Plan to share with the key stakeholders. And we went back, well, our assistant coordinator went back into the mining communities to really share the results of and the proposed strategies of the NAP and raise awareness that this will be implemented soon. So that video was a nice segue into some other mercury awareness raising activities that we have done in the Caribbean region. So for those of you who attended our side event at the last COP3, we spoke a lot about the development of the communication materials and the lessons learned throughout the project process. And you'll see on the screen that we've gone even further in our character development and animation since then. So you'll see on screen that this is our Captain Minamata, who was developed to bring the awareness and capture the attention of the younger audience as he comes through the Caribbean to sort of fight mercury issues. Next slide, please. All right, so you'll see here that we have quite a range of communication products, ranging from the simple infographic squares on the left, which talks about the mercury in everyday products and the different routes of exposure, as well as some tips to protect yourself and your family from mercury, all the way up until the dynamic sort of storyline of Captain Minamata and Dr. Mercury, you see there on the right. In the flyer there. So we have this wide range of products to really capture the attention of the different audiences that we have. And you'll see there in the flyer on the right, the little boy in front of Captain Minamata and Dr. Mercury. He is actually a character that was developed in a previous communications campaign for persistent organic pollutants called Stop the Pops. At the bottom there, you'll see him jumping up in the air. And the aim with this was to really have this overarching communications campaign for chemicals and waste within the Caribbean. So for those who may have seen Gary, or we also have a Grandpa Keith that plays in both the mercury and the persistent organic pollutant products, they would recognize him and they would understand that this is an overarching issue within the Caribbean for the chemicals and waste agenda. Next slide, please. I think we have one more video to play for you all. So you could go ahead, Janine. Thank you.
Across the region, a little-known substance has been lurking. This is the story of mercury in the Caribbean. Hi, my name is Captain Minamata, defender and protector against mercury. It's time you learned the truth about it. Across the land, mercury has found its way into many unsuspecting places. Let's take a closer look. In a rural mining site nearby, mercury is often used to extract gold from soil and sediments. Did you know that carefully managing mercury with the use of personal protective equipment can help reduce its impact on your health? Mercury at the dentist. Did you know that mercury is used in silver dental amalgam fillings? And disposing of this amalgam can harm the environment. It's best to use white composite fillings instead. Unhealthy vapors are emitted during the mixing of amalgam. Mercury in household products. Did you know that Hg is the chemical symbol for mercury? And when you throw away products containing mercury, they end up in landfills and can negatively affect our environment, animals, and even our own health. Saving the Caribbean isn't just for superheroes. When you buy mercury-free alternatives, you too are doing your part to make mercury history. Read labels when purchasing products and switch to mercury-free alternatives. Ask your dentist about white composite fillings instead of silver dental amalgam fillings. Educate yourself on the different sources of mercury in your home country.
Thank you. Great, thank you so much. So I will now pass on to my colleague, Ms. Janine Boudram, who will take you through the next short portion of the presentation, looking ahead at implementing the lessons learned. Over to you, Janine.
Hi, thank you, Laura. Good day, everyone, or good evening or good night, depending on where you are. My name is Janine Boudram, and I am the research analyst at the BCRC Caribbean. And today I will be taking you through this segment entitled A Look Ahead, Implementing Lessons Learned, which will highlight some of the ongoing projects that are being executed by the BCRC Caribbean. Okay, so at present, the BCRC Caribbean is executing approximately 15 projects, many of which have ties to the Minamata Convention. For example, we are executing 2 projects which will seek to ensure the environmentally sound management of waste electrical and electronic equipment, or e-waste, and end-of-life or used mobile phones. By diverting these items from landfills, we can avoid some of the unwarranted anthropogenic releases of mercury. And we also have some projects which are more closely tied to the convention. So as my director would have mentioned earlier, we have developed several Minamata initial assessments for Caribbean countries. And presently we are developing the MIE for the Bahamas. Under another project, MIEs would have been developed for 4 countries. We would have finalized the MIEs for Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. the MIE for Grenada is currently being finalized under that project, and as previously mentioned, Grenada would have recently acceded to the Basel, Stockholm, and Rotterdam conventions, and we are hoping that this work will also encourage them to accede to the Minamata Convention. Some of the biggest projects for the center, though, are 3 projects under the Jeff Islands program. And ISLANDS here stands for Implementing Sustainable Low and Non-Chemical Development in Small Island Developing States. So these projects are funded through an allocation made specifically for SIDS and least developed countries under the Jeff 7. Projects under the Jeff Islands program will support the on-the-ground implementation of the Stockholm and Minamata Conventions, as well as SICOM. This segment of the presentation will elaborate more on the execution of these projects in the Caribbean. Okay. So the Jeff Islands program is a global program that will facilitate the entry of 33 SIDS across 4 different regions into a safe chemical development pathway. And what do we mean by that? Strategies will be developed to ensure that stockpiles of chemicals which may have been phased out, or other chemicals or products containing chemicals which have been historically accumulated, are managed in an environmentally sound manner. Moreover, strategies will be developed to ensure that the future buildup of these chemicals is prevented. The Islands program has its own brand identity, and on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see the logo for the Caribbean projects under the Islands program. Different regions have been assigned different colors, but ours is a sort of green. People may fight me on the name of this particular shade, but at the end of the day, the logo is meant to symbolize unified upward movement in a positive direction. Yes, and in this slide, we won't go through the complex details of the program. This is just to highlight that the UNEP is the main implementing agency in the program, and to also highlight the 4 different regions that are involved in the program. So in addition to the Caribbean region, there's also participation from the Pacific and Indian Oceans, and 3 countries from the Atlantic have also been recently added to the program, bringing the total number of SIDS involved to 33. There are a total of 12 Caribbean countries. There are 3 Caribbean projects being implemented across a total of 12 Caribbean countries under the Islands program. There are 4 components in the Islands program. They are firstly preventing the future buildup of chemicals in SIDS. Secondly, ensuring the safe management and disposal of historically accumulated waste. The third, promote systems for the future management of waste and chemicals entering SIDS, and the outcome here is to ensure that there's life cycle management of chemicals and products containing chemicals in SIDS. And last but not least, the program also seeks to promote information exchange and dissemination of knowledge across all SIDS involved in the program, as well as SIDS which are not involved in the program. And this will ensure that there is South-South cooperation through knowledge sharing. So in this slide, we really just wanted to break down the 3 specific Caribbean projects under the Islands program. So one of the first projects that we started work on under the program is the idea assigned to this is Jeff 10279, This is jointly implemented by the UNEP and the FAO. There are 9 beneficiary countries: Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Belize, Dominican Republic, Guyana, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. And this project was approved for execution on May 28th, 2021. So we would have recently kicked off the execution of this project at the very beginning of October through the hosting of a national inception workshop for all project countries involved, as well as external stakeholders and co-financiers for the project. The total budget here is US $11 million, and $8 million of this will support the implementation of activities through UNEP, and another 3 will be implemented by the other 3 rather will be implemented by the FAO. All Caribbean projects have an executing time frame of 5 years, and based on the approval, the time in which this project was approved, it will be executed between 2021 and 2026. After the JEF 10279, work would have commenced on project development for JEF Islands 10279. 3 other Caribbean countries would have indicated interest in being added to the program, and they are the Bahamas, Cuba, and Dominica. So they would have been encompassed under the project shown in the middle, JEF Islands 10472, which is implemented solely by the UNEP. We would have developed the project activities for the beneficiary countries already, and we submitted the CU endorsement, the project document, to the JEF Secretariat for approval. The budget for this project is $10 million US, and we are expecting that the time frame, we are expecting approval either later this year or early next year. So it may be that the time frame for execution will be 2021 to 2026 or 2022 to 2027. The third project on the extreme right of your screen is implemented by the IDB, and under this project, a Caribbean incubator facility will be developed for the sustainable management of hazardous chemicals and waste. This project was approved in July of 2021 and has a budget of $10 million US. We will go into some of the project activities in more detail in the next slide. And this will have a similar execution timeframe to the 10279 project. Just to note some of how the Minamata initial assessments as an enabling activity would have informed the development of project activities and quantitative targets. This would have assisted us in determining some of the national priorities. So during national consultations, the information from, well, in addition to, as we would have mentioned, this project would also support the implementation of the Stockholm Convention, where you have national implementation plans. But with respect to the Minamata Convention, we would have consulted the Minamata initial assessments developed to guide us in determining what are some of the key national priorities that should be addressed in the JEF Islands projects, and the targets or global environmental benefits that would emerge from these projects. So data for the Dominican Republic and the updates of mercury inventories for Antigua and Barbuda and Suriname found that 39 tons of mercury are being released per year from products and processes. And under the Jeff 10, under the Jeff 10472 project, approximately 1 ton of mercury in products will be managed, thus amounting to a total of 40 tons of mercury in products being managed through the Jeff 10279 and Jeff 10472 projects. Estimated releases will be managed and future releases will be avoided. As it relates to the targets of 30 metric tons of liquid mercury imports being prevented, data from the most recent inventory conducted for Guyana and Suriname indicated that 28 tons of mercury are released collectively per year to the environment, mainly due to gold production with mercury amalgamation. It is anticipated, therefore, that through the development and implementation of legislation, institutional strengthening, and customs capacity building, that the control and phase out of mercury will be achieved under this project. And how we broke it down was that over the last 3 years of the project, we hope that the aim is that 5 tons of liquid mercury per year would be avoided in these 2 countries, which amounts to a total of 30 metric tons of mercury imports being prevented. Sorry. So this is where we want to just highlight some of the project activities under the Jeff Islands 10279 and 10472 projects. Granted that the Caribbean does not have the available technologies for the stabilization and elimination of mercury from the environment, some of the project activities to be executed include the collection and export of waste mercury and mercury-containing wastes for stabilization and elimination. In the case of Cuba, the technology transfer for the crushing of CFL valves and extraction of mercury for onward treatment and management is also planned. Some of the other activities that are planned include training programs for border control agencies. And here we also want to do a pilot project to demonstrate and train border control agencies and customs officers on the use of handheld X-ray fluorescence detectors, which would help to identify mercury and mercury-added products. We also want to support the amendment of HS codes to improve the identification of mercury and mercury-added products. And of course, many Caribbean countries are also subscribed to or members of the Caribbean community. So this would have to be done in partnership with the Council for Trade and Economic Development, or COTED. One of our outputs also involves improving sustainable procurement practices in applications where mercury and mercury-added products may be used, and pilot projects will be designed for countries, and the specific products to be phased out or managed will depend on the national priorities of the country. And last but not least, one of the, as I would have mentioned, one of the key activities would be the strategies for ensuring sustainable management of mercury and stockpiles of mercury-added products. Under the IDB implemented project, a facility has been approved for the provision of technical assistance and investment grants. So this would be non-reimbursable funding to support the development and integration of innovative solutions around chemicals and waste. And this particular project does have 5 components, but they are mirrored onto the 4 components of the Jeff Islands program. So we would want to, of course, ensure that there's financing, policy, and regulatory enabling mechanisms in place. And some of the activities could include technical feasibility designs for public sector projects and small and medium and large enterprises in the private sector. So in terms of implementing the lessons learned, we considered what would have been taking place during the data collection stages in the Guyana NAP, and where there are travel restrictions, we would have found that national project assistants will be hired to provide that on-the-ground support during project execution. And one of the things that we noted was that your national consultants really do know the field and they know their country best, and that really facilitates communication. We, of course, will host meetings remotely as far as possible, but we have also tried in-person meetings where COVID-19 protocols are still maintained. So in the picture, you would see the setup of a training session for customs personnel, and we would have maintained that social distancing and limit contact by providing water and so on, and food specifically on individual tables. And one of the legacy items that we would want to develop would be an information management platform which would serve as the repository for training materials and information on chemicals and waste management in the Caribbean. And this is something that can be consulted quickly and easily, and we want to maintain that accessibility so that we could ensure that best practices are continuously passed down. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my presentation, and at this juncture, I'll ask that Ms. Amara Privat from the Center, there are any questions in the chat or any raised hands. I'll also defer to the Secretariat to confirm if we have time to take any questions, and if we do, we can arrange for a few. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Janine. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good day. So there is one message in the chat. This is from Carlo Manuel and Alonso Hernandez, and he says he is from the Environmental Laboratories of the International Atomic Energy Agency in Monaco. I would like to know what laboratory capabilities exist in the Caribbean region to analyze mercury in the environment. Is there any regional project to strengthen the regional capacities of the laboratories involved in the region?
Hi.
Okay, so
Okay. No, go. You go. I can take a break.
okay, you can complement what I say, I guess. So I hope that some of the information in the presentation on the Islands program would help to answer your question. So in addition to the training on the XRF devices that would assist customs officers in the detection, we also want to assess the laboratory capacity as one of the project activities and develop strategies to increase best practices and also to best practices with analysis, and also determine where there are gaps and how these may be best filled. Jewel, do you want to add anything
Yes,
to what Andy has said?
thanks, Janine, and thanks very much for the question. Very good question as well. So the laboratory capacities are of course limited in the region. As you'd see, Janine did point out, like getting the X-ray fluorescence, which is one of the methods of doing a rapid assessment on, for instance, if a container comes into the country. But the success that we've had is actually through the Minamata Convention itself, with a specific international program project being funded through the Secretariat for the Government of Antigua and Barbuda, and they are seeking to develop a Caribbean regional monitoring network, and that will seek to embellish the monitoring capacity for the region. Right now, they're trying to solicit partner countries to be part of this process with them as they move ahead in getting this done. They also have international support in the form of the Biodiversity Research Institute, who also assisted us in doing our Minamata initial assessments and providing backstopping. So it's sort of a mutual relationship and good friends and people that we know. Thanks.
Thank you, Jewel. So there's another question in the chat from Elam in Egypt, who asks, what are the challenges that you faced?
Just generally?
So Elam followed up with, how do you choose your styles and how many samples?
There, that's for you. Yes, that's for lunch. Yes, that's for you.
Sorry, to the person from Egypt, I don't know if they can take the floor just to say the clarification, because it could mean a range of things. Maybe we could go to the next question, because I'm not sure which challenges he's referring specifically to, Amara. Can I open your phone? Can we do that? Can we unmute him? I don't know. And we also
sorry.
we have persons leaving to go to regional meetings as well, so we have to be respectful of that.
Yes, yes. Thanks for that. So if you want, you can address one more question, and then we would need to wrap up the event. So
Sure.
my apologies for that, but there is
No problem,
we do
yeah.
respect the regional meeting. So
Okay.
back to you.
All right, so the last question that we will look at is there a role for non-state actors and local community, and if funding support is available for them? And this came from Emily.
Yes, we have another good success story in a few of the Caribbean countries, but one comes to mind again in Antigua and Barbuda, and we've really worked very closely with Dr. Bird and her team. I'm seeing that the person from Egypt is asking why we didn't respond, but I wasn't clear on the question, sorry. So we do have an NGO working very closely with us in rolling out what is proposed in the Minamata initial assessment on the ground and rolling out the communication products with us. So there is a role for the NGO CSO type approaches. Also in the government of Guyana's case, where we had indigenous communities, we also see a role for them as well. Thanks. I'm sorry to the person in Egypt. I know we have to wrap up now, Richard, but if you want, you can email us at info@bcrc-caribbean.org and we can address any of the additional questions. Really sorry about that. No, we can't unmute you, sorry. And we have a queue here to wrap up as well. So I'm sorry about it. It's not that I just wasn't clear on what challenges you were focusing on. Because we spoke quite a lot about many things.
Well, thank you so much, Jewel, and thank you so much to the BCRC team, and as well as to the government representatives of the government of Guyana, who organized and worked hard to deliver this event to all the participants here. So rest assured, in terms of the questions that were unanswered but have been written in the chat, We are now taking note and copying the chat, and we will be providing these to the organizers so that they can respond to you, to your questions on a bilateral basis. And if you have any additional questions and that you would like to send to the organizers, and you don't know how to do it, so just send it my way and I can forward it to Jewel and her team, so you can have, at least I can help connect you all. All right. So with that, many thanks to everyone. We've got a full day ahead of us, or at least for some of us. And don't forget, there's going to be an art break this the evening or late afternoon, wherever you are. And we thank you for your continued support of the convention. So with that, we'll close for this event. Have a good day, take care, and be safe.